Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for making some time out of your busy schedule to join us in this little study that we're doing in our midweek study in the book of Daniel. I hope last week was interesting to you, brought up a number of things that maybe you hadn't been exposed to before, and I hope that was helpful and not putting off in any way. But the book of Daniel has so many interesting things that border on realms that are maybe a little challenging for us living here in the 21st century, Christianity-based, Midwestern-based. So much of those things influence how we look and process things. And so before I continue in the verses, I wanted to comment a little something. Obviously, the setting here is Nebuchadnezzar has had a dream, and he's relaying this dream and noticing the detail in which he is able to recall this dream. And that's kind of standing out to me today because I've had dreams. I don't claim any of them have been from God, but I struggle in my dreams to even remember sometimes small portions of them. Sometimes I will have dreams and then wake up in the morning and realize they were either good or bad, or normally they're kind of just bizarre with things that are very strange and people in it that are, who knows where they come from. And I'll just say I had this really weird dream, but struggle to say much about it. Um, and remember much about it. But here Nebuchadnezzar has had this dream, and the detail is just incredibly minute as to how he can relay this. Makes me think of a book I just started reading. It was written by a doctor who spent her career in the intensive care unit of a hospital. And in this intensive care unit, she encountered people who have had experiences while they were being attended to. Um, you may call it out-of-body experiences, you may call it near-death experiences. One was a complete death experience where the person had um, been dead for quite a few minutes, and they were ready to um, you know just sign off and cart her away, and she came back to life again. And some of these people have had experiences that they relate to her, and of course this is how the book is written, but the commonality there is that they are also able to describe in very vivid detail everything that they saw, everything that they experienced. So the commonality between Nebuchadnezzar's dream here and those are just the immersion into this dream that makes such an impression upon them that they are able to have complete recall. Um, and maybe it isn't complete, but it is of a level that's very challenging for me to even understand, even in the fact of, my own self. I know how limited I am to remember just a conversation with a person or have an experience that might be, you attend some event and you want to explain it to someone else, and you struggle to even process and capture all of the um, topics and the whole arena of the event. Um, we don't capture all of that, and at least maybe it's there, but we haven't been able to recall it. But these dreams here fall into a different category, and so I find that quite fascinating. Also, here looking at Nebuchadnezzar, I also draw a parallel to the dreams of Pharaoh prior to Joseph coming and setting up the feeding of the people and Israel coming in and saving the children of Israel. That there's a parallel here that these kings were um, designed, brought into realm by God for protection of the Jewish people. And with that, they seem to be given some special insight, but also some special limits. So, what this is telling me is these dreams definitely do not require you to be holy, to be in a special, deep relationship with God. Um, they are given these dreams because of a plan and a purpose that God has for his people. And so that's a commonality. But yet dreams are very elusive. Dreams are very strange. We do know that dreams are real. Just happened to do a quick search in the Bible that dreams are mentioned at least 21 times throughout the Bible. We see in the book of Joel, chapter 2, verse 28, that one of the prophecies of the church time, of the time when God is living in his people, is in Joel chapter 2, verse 28, talks about the people receiving the Spirit of the Lord and the young men dreaming dreams and the old men seeing visions. And when it talks about his spirit would be poured upon the young and the old and the maidens and so forth. And we see Peter quotes that in the book of Acts, chapter 2, verse 17. And he specifically talks about dreams and visions. And so, again, we can understand biblically anyway that dreams and visions are a way that God uses. It doesn't appear that they have outgrown their use. It doesn't appear that they are not functioning today. But in our culture, we have a real struggle. At least I'll just speak from the culture that I'm familiar with here in the normal church realm has a real struggle with the infilling of God's Spirit and the giftings that it brings, and these realms of dreams and interpretations and speaking and so forth as God's Spirit um, authorizes and as God's Spirit prompts. It's something that our society has really lost maybe not an interest in, but downplayed the importance of. Our society is very data driven, very fact driven, very scientifically driven, and that's why the medical industry the medical world, I'll say, has struggles when patients have these experiences and it doesn't fit into their realm of thinking, the realm of teaching, can't be quantified, but yet to these people who have them, it's very, very real. Just as Nebuchadnezzar here, his dream was very, very real to him. And so let's, with that little bit of thoughts that I had, continue looking at what is verse 11 here, would be verse 14 in your Christian Bible. Nebuchadnezzar is describing his vision. Now this watcher comes to him and changes the whole scene. It says, cut down the tree, cut off its branches, shake off its fruit, scatter it, let the beasts get away from underneath it, let the fowls leave its branches, just leave a stump, leave its roots, and then talks about a band of iron and brass. Um, Not quite sure what the intention of that is. Iron and brass do show up in one of the other dreams as somewhat of a kingdom, a lesser kingdom. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar was gold. The next conquering one was silver. Then it became brass, and then it became iron. So this may have some indication of those other kingdoms that are coming. And so uh, it talks about another portion where he is wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field. And so this is where things get really kind of interesting. We'll see an explanation of this later. But then I have highlighted in verse 13 that his heart would be changed from a man's heart and a beast's heart given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. This is just a very troubling piece of information here as to what can happen in a person's heart and what their actions can become when their heart is changed. And again, I'm sure many sermons could be based upon this. Our whole purpose in our walk with God is that our hearts would be softened and to be changed to be like God, and that our hearts would be more in tune with God. That seems, at least, is the heartbeat of a Christian, of wanting to be more and more like God. But we do see evidences of hearts turning the opposite direction. And here we definitely will see this occurring in Nebuchadnezzar's life. And so the verse 14, the matter is by the decree of the watchers, again talking about those heavenly beings that we spoke about last week, and to the intent God has a plan and a purpose, that the living may know that the Most High God ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth it up over the lowest of men. This is just acknowledging, God's purpose, as I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this video, that God was protecting the Jewish people, and they were carried into captivity, but God was still very much with them. Unfortunately, this type of verse here has been used in detrimental ways in our society. There's another verse in the New Testament where Paul is instructing that we need to obey those that have the rule over us, for they watch for us, that the kingdoms that are in place are ordained by God, and that they are there to provide civility and stability and peacefulness, and that we're supposed to submit ourselves to those in those authorities. And again, the context of that is sometimes taken in a way it wasn't intended. In fact, horribly wrong in a way that Adolf Hitler used those verses in the New Testament to keep people from dissenting over his um, form of government and what he did and the atrocities that he committed. He would use these verses and had the support of Christians in Germany at that time. And he would say, well, I've been brought here, I've been put in place by God, and you have to submit to my authority. And that becomes just unfathomable, difficult to process and to believe that that was actually used in such a way. And people would look at that and struggle with that. And so here we see kind of the basis for those thoughts. Obviously, Nebuchadnezzar was set up by God, but he had limits, is what we're going to see here, and that the angel, the watcher is speaking to him saying, okay, yes, you are here. Yes, you have succeeded in becoming a ruler, but you are not without restraints. You are not without limits on what you can do. And this is that watcher stepping in uh, and warning Nebuchadnezzar to stay within those limits. And I think that's the part that our rulers, those in leadership, no matter what country it is, when they are trying to do God's will, is quite a different scenario as to what their main purpose would be. Who are they looking out for? Who are they trying to protect? How does it benefit God's kingdom rather than themselves? And I think that's the challenge to every person in every place of authority, is to keep in mind that God's kingdom is supreme, and only when we can be a part of God's kingdom in a way to further his kingdom and to bring blessings to his people and to take care of his people and to cherish the um, sanctity of humanity, realizing that uh, all mankind is created in God's image and in his likeness, and that his breath is inside of us, and that these things are to be taken very seriously. These things are supposed to be cherished and seeking to do God's will. So this dream finishes, verse 15. Nebuchadnezzar says, okay, I had this dream. He talks to Belteshazzar. Remember, his name is that his Babylonian name for Daniel. You'll see the name kind of go back and forth to declare this interpretation because all the other wise men could not do it. Again, I find this quite interesting that he keeps those people around. The king must have had other things that have happened that these other wise men were able to meet his needs and satisfy him the way he had expected. But when it came to the really big things, they were not able to interpret it. But he knew who Daniel was. He knew more specifically whose God Daniel served, and that he knew that the spirit of the holy gods, again, remember, this is not a theological discussion here. This is the king of a pagan nation observing Daniel and expressing his thoughts as to who Daniel served. Daniel served the one true God, who Daniel acknowledged, but the king obviously wasn't on the same wavelength. Verse 16 is one that I just think is so incredible. It says, then Daniel, of course, referencing now his name, um, his Hebrew name and his Babylonian name was Belteshazzar, was appalled for a while, and his thoughts affrighted him. This has so much fun things in it. We have to just take another little look at that. And so let's take a look at the text in Bible Hub and scroll down to where Daniel um, talks about this. And this is would be in um, verse 19 in the Christian Bible. And so we see Daniel was astonished. Let's unpack that word and see. It's the word shemin, or shemam, excuse me. Shemam. Remember, this is a Aramaic word, not a Hebrew word, and it comes from the word meaning desolation, to waste, to be in horror. It is to stun, to devastate, to stupefy. So this is a really strong word. This is complete, um, just knocked out. You'll see here it's only used one time, and that is in this verse that we're reading. And so it's always interesting when you see these words that are used one time, because you know that there was a special reason for that. Unfortunately, translating it into English or here into the Greek as it's making a reference does not retain that unity, or that uniqueness, excuse me, of this word the way that the Hebrew does, the way the Aramaic does. And so we know that this is such a strong word that Daniel just went silent for a while. So it says that he was stupefied for a time, and his thoughts troubled him. What we notice here is this word is in a PL form, which is a very intense form of the verb. And so we're just going to unpack that one and take a look at this. And it uses the word bahal, and it means to be terrified, to be dismayed, but it also has the word hasten with it, which would give the indication that your heart is beating wildly. It's a fight or flight, uh, flee type response that's triggered within you. And so, with that little bit of explanation, I think we can understand that Daniel was really in a spot here, and how that God instantly gave him the interpretation of this. He didn't have to go and say, "Okay, King, let me go and pray for a little bit. Let me, consult with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and we'll, here, let me write this down. I'll try to remember everything you told me." This is definitely a God moment. This is something that God is with Daniel and gives him um, an instantaneous interpretation of this dream. And so this is on a different level, like I was relaying from the book of the lady who was a doctor in the intensive care unit, and the vividness in which these people could retain their dreams. Daniel is in this same type of realm. Um, we find some places in the Bible where this is referenced. One that comes to mind is on Mount Sinai, when the Israelites received the Ten Commandments. They received all the books of the law when Moses was in the mountain. Um, it describes that whole vision in ways that are different than the way we would describe it. It said that they saw thunderings and heard lightnings. And Jewish sages would say that all of their senses were engaged in this moment. And that's all that comes to mind when I think of Daniel and his dream. Was so moved that all of his senses were at full attention, being addressed together. And it was just that full level of sensory, I'll say even overload of God's Spirit working within him. And so it took him a while to recover. Doesn't say how long, doesn't say, that he sat there for 10 minutes dumbfounded. We just know that he was stricken. He was struck down and he couldn't respond. Finally, he was able to compose himself and he speaks to the king and said, let not the dream or its interpretation affright you. Well, this is really strange because Daniel was frightened. Daniel was so moved by this, and obviously the king was previously, and Daniel's trying to just put this all into a perspective. And so I find that kind of interesting. So he says, let this dream be to them that hate you. This is another thing that's interesting is that Daniel had a good relationship with King Nebuchadnezzar, and he appreciated the favor that Nebuchadnezzar had given him. He appreciated the position he was in. He believed he was in the middle of God's will. He didn't really want this to change. And so he's looking at this and saying, there are people out there that hate you. I'm not one of them. But I'm going to interpret this dream for you because it's something that your adversaries will take advantage of. It's something that we want to warn you of, king, so you can prepare yourself. And so he talks about the tree which grew strong, leaves were fair, describes this in exactly the same amount of detail that the king did. So again, Daniel had to be given this, and he's saying, this is a representation of you, king, that you're grown and you're strong and your greatness was known, and you were famous throughout all the earth. Talks about the watcher again coming down, saying, hew it, and let your portion be with the beasts of the field. So he's saying, this is a decree, king, that you are going to be driven from men. You're going to be dwelling with the beasts of the field. You'll be made to eat grass as oxen. You're going to be living outside. You'll be wet with the dew from heaven. And the 7 times will become 7 years that pass over. But there is also a um, a warning here, and the reason for it is that you will know that the Most High ruleth the kingdoms of men and give it to whoever he will. And that's the purpose of this. And so the king, I find again the mercies of God being given to the king to give him this warning. This is second, third warning that this king has had in these dreams of just to get in line, to be what God wanted him to be. Um, just a beautiful, beautiful display of the mercies of God. And Daniel reiterates that, and he said, "O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto you. Get your life in order, guy. Break off the sins, give alms. Your iniquities will be forgiven by showing mercy to the poor." And we're going to stop at the end of this verse because this portion here has so much packed into it. Now, remember, this is a pagan king taking care of the people of Israel. He doesn't have a relationship with God, but Daniel is pointing out things that a person can do that can show that their heart is in a right place. Giving alms, showing mercy to the poor. You will find this as a very common theme throughout the Old Testament as to maybe not a way to obtain favor from God, but it's a way of showing a change of heart, that it requires someone with a heart of benevolence, a heart of mercy, a heart of love and compassion towards people that is not a natural condition found in a pagan culture, we'll say. It is something that Judaism and Christianity spends most of its time talking about and is really the core of our relationship with God is to have a pure heart. And so Daniel is explaining to him in his day and time, this is pre-messianic, pre-savior, what the king can do to find favor with God is to stop sinning, to repent, to turn away. And that will then bring about a desire to correct the situation by giving of alms and showing mercy to the poor. We find that Jesus was also a great proponent of giving alms and showing mercy to the poor. And just beautiful to see this is a core thread of what a broken heart, what a contrite heart, what a contrite spirit, and a heart right before God is intended to portray. So, a lot of stuff here. Beautiful metaphors, beautiful stories. I hope you enjoyed this study, and we're going to stop here. And I just pray it's a blessing in your life and look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care.